AITA for telling my dad I won't forgive him for abandoning us? 15 years ago, when I was 10 years old, my dad left us. One day, he packed up his things, walked out the door, and didn't come back. There wasn't much of an explanation, just that he was leaving us, and a vague promise that we'd still see him sometimes. I remember standing there, watching him go, with my younger brother by my side, both of us too confused and scared to fully understand what was happening. It wasn't until days later that the reality hit us: he wasn't coming back. My mom was devastated. She was suddenly a single mother raising 2 kids, working multiple jobs to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. The stress wore her down, but she never let it show too much. She worked tirelessly, barely sleeping, always worried about how to make ends meet. We lived paycheck to paycheck, and there were nights when dinner was just canned soup and crackers because it was all we had. In the beginning, my dad still called. It wasn't often, maybe once a week, but those calls started to dwindle as time went on. Eventually, they stopped altogether. He was living a new life with a new woman, and they had their own family. My brother and I didn't hear from him again for years. It felt like we had been erased from his life, replaced by something new and shiny. He didn't care about the struggles we faced or the emotional toll his leaving took on us. For a long time, I thought it was my fault. That maybe I wasn't good enough or that I had done something to push him away. As I grew older, that guilt turned into anger. I couldn't understand how a father could just abandon his kids like that. Leave them without so much as a second thought. I watched my mom struggle every day to provide for us, taking on extra shifts at work, always exhausted but never complaining. She was the one who stayed, the one who picked up the pieces of our shattered family. She was the one who was there for every scraped knee, every school event, every late night talk when I couldn't sleep. My dad, on the other hand, was just a ghost, someone who existed in the background of my life. Barely a memory. Life went on. I grew up, graduated high school, went to college, and started my career. I built a life for myself. But there was always this lingering resentment toward my dad. No matter how much time passed, I couldn't forget how he left us. How he turned his back on his responsibilities and never looked back. My mom, despite everything, never bad-mouthed him. She would just say that people make mistakes and that maybe one day I would understand. My brother, who was younger when my dad left, didn't seem to hold the same anger that I did. He was always more forgiving, more willing to believe that people could change. Then, about 3 months ago, out of the blue, my dad called me. I hadn't heard his voice in years, and just hearing him say, "Hey, it's Dad," felt surreal. He asked if we could meet up, said he wanted to talk. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to hang up and never speak to him again. But another part of me was curious. Why now? Why, after all these years, was he reaching out? We met at a coffee shop. He looked older than I remembered, with more gray hair and lines on his face. He seemed nervous, almost like he didn't know what to say. After some awkward small talk, he finally got to the point. He told me he was sorry for leaving, that he regretted how he handled things, and that he wanted to be a part of my life again. He said he had been going through a lot back then and that he made mistakes. But he hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive him. Hearing him apologize didn't bring the relief I thought it would. Instead, it made me angry all over again. How could he just apologize after everything we went through? I told him exactly how his leaving had affected us, how it tore our family apart, how my mom had to work herself to the bone to provide for us, how my brother and I had to grow up without a father. I told him about all the birthdays he missed, the school plays, the graduations, and every other milestone he wasn't there for. I couldn't just forgive him. Not after everything. He tried to defend himself, saying he was going through tough times, that he wasn't happy back then, and that he didn't know how to be a good father. But to me, those were just excuses. Everyone goes through tough times, but not everyone walks out on their family. I couldn't accept his reasoning. And I told him that. I told him that forgiveness wasn't something I could just give because he asked for it. The pain of what he did was still there, and it wasn't going away anytime soon. After that, things got awkward. He didn't push the issue any further, and we finished our conversation in silence. I left feeling conflicted. Part of me was glad I finally got to say how I felt. But another part of me wondered if I had been too harsh. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had done the right thing. My dad may have been remorseful, but that didn't erase the years of hurt he caused. Since that meeting, my family has been pressuring me to give him another chance. My mom, who had every right to be angry at him, has been surprisingly forgiving. She says people make mistakes, and that maybe he really has changed. She thinks I should be kind to him, that I should let go of the past and move forward. My brother, ever the peacemaker, has been trying to get me to talk to our dad again, saying that holding on to anger isn't going to help anyone. But I can't help the way I feel. I can't just forgive him for abandoning us when we needed him most. He wasn't there for us when things were hard. And now that he wants to come back into my life, I'm supposed to just welcome him with open arms? It doesn't feel right. It feels like I'm being asked to forget all the pain he caused. To pretend that those years without him didn't matter. But they did matter. They shaped who I am today. And I'm not sure I'm ready to let go of that. Some people have called me selfish for not wanting to forgive him. They say that life is short and that holding on to grudges will only make me bitter. But to me, it's not about holding a grudge. It's about acknowledging the hurt he caused and understanding that some things can't be fixed with a simple apology. I'm not saying I'll never forgive him. Maybe one day, when I've had more time to process everything, I'll be able to let go of the anger. But for now, I can't. My dad has tried reaching out a few more times since our meeting. But I haven't responded. I don't know what to say to him. I don't know if there's anything left to say. My mom keeps telling me to give him a chance. That people change. But I'm not sure I believe that. He left us once before. Who's to say he won't do it again? For now, I'm focusing on my own life. Trying to move forward without letting the past weigh me down too much. But it's hard. It's hard when the person who was supposed to be there for you when you were growing up just wasn't. It's hard to trust someone who broke your heart when you were a kid. And it's hard to forgive someone who doesn't seem to fully understand the extent of the damage they caused. So, AITA for telling my dad I won't forgive him? Maybe. But right now, I can't bring myself to do it. Maybe in time, things will change. Maybe I'll find it in myself to forgive him. But for now, I'm still that 10-year-old kid watching his dad walk out the door, wondering why he wasn't enough to make him stay.
I told my little sister's best friend that my brother stole her college fund. A few weeks ago, I found myself tangled in a situation I never expected, one that's been tearing me up ever since. My brother, Tom, and I were always close growing up. Despite our 3-year age difference, we got along well, did everything together. He was more than a brother, he was my best friend. Even as adults, we stayed close, though our relationship with our parents was more distant. Tom and I, in many ways, leaned on each other more than anyone else in the family. Tom works in finance, and he's always been the one people turn to for advice when it comes to money. He's sharp, responsible, or at least I thought he was until recently. He's had a gambling habit for a while now, but I never knew how deep it went. He played it off like it was just a casual thing, something he could control, and I believed him because, well, he was Tom, he could handle anything, right? Our little sister, Grace, is 18, and she's been best friends with Emma since they were in kindergarten. Emma practically grew up in our house. Her family wasn't as well off as ours, but she's always been determined to make it through on her own terms. Emma worked hard, saved every penny, and managed to put together a small college fund for herself. My mom and her mom are close, and since Emma's parents didn't have much experience managing that kind of money, my mom asked Tom to help her out. He was the family's financial expert, after all, and everyone trusted him. I wish I could say it shocked me when Tom confessed to what he'd done. But deep down, it didn't. He came over one night after work, looking more stressed than usual. At first, he was just making small talk, avoiding whatever was really eating at him. Then, he dropped the bomb. "Hey, man," he said, fidgeting, unable to meet my eyes. "I did something really stupid, and I don't know how to fix it." I didn't press him at first, thinking it was just some minor work thing. But as he kept talking, my stomach began to knot up. He told me that a few months back, he borrowed $5 from Emma's college fund. It started small, But one bet led to another, and before he knew it, the money was gone. His plan was to replace it with his next paycheck. Then his next one after that. But every time, he ended up losing more. "I'm going to fix it," he said. "I swear. I just need some time. I'll get the money back. And no one will ever know." My head was spinning. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Emma wasn't just some random client, she was like family. She worked her butt off to save that money. The thought of her losing her chance at college because of a mistake my brother made was gut-wrenching. But here's the thing. I didn't want to betray Tom. He's my brother, and we've always had each other's backs. We've been through some tough times together. And this wasn't easy for him to admit. He wasn't a bad person, he just made a terrible choice. He begged me not to say anything, not to tell Emma or our parents. He said he needed more time, and he'd find a way to get the money back. I didn't know what to do. On one hand, I understood his desperation. He didn't want to ruin his career or his reputation. And he genuinely seemed like he wanted to make things right. On the other hand, Emma's future was on the line. She didn't come from money. That $5 was everything to her. And she was set to start school in a couple of months. For the next few days, I wrestled with my conscience. I could have kept Tom's secret and given him time to fix things. But what if he couldn't? What if this spiraled even further? And how could I live with myself knowing I let Emma's dreams slip away because I wanted to protect my brother? I thought about what I would want if I were in her shoes. If someone stole from me, I'd want to know the truth, no matter how painful it was. So, after days of sleepless nights, I made the hardest decision of my life. I called Emma. She was overjoyed to hear from me at first, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. I felt sick as I told her everything, explaining that Tom had taken the money and lost it gambling. The devastation in her voice was something I'll never forget. She didn't cry, but I could hear her holding back, the silence between her questions growing longer. After we hung up, I knew I'd shattered her trust in our family. But I also knew she deserved to know the truth, even if it hurt. Emma confronted Tom the next day. At first, he denied it, as I knew he would. But eventually, under the weight of everything, he broke down and admitted what he'd done. I wasn't there for the confrontation, but I heard from Grace that it was ugly. Emma was heartbroken, and Tom couldn't look her in the eye. The fallout was swift. Emma's family was furious. And understandably so. That's when the backlash from my own family began. My parents were livid that I had exposed Tom's secret, saying I should have kept quiet and given him a chance to make things right. They said I'd ruined his life and our family's reputation. They were more concerned with the fact that I'd told Emma than the fact that Tom had gambled away her college fund. My mom, especially, couldn't believe I would go against my brother like that. "Family sticks together," she said, over and over again, like a mantra. But what about Emma? Wasn't she family too? Wasn't her future just as important as Tom's redemption? Tom stopped speaking to me altogether. He was hurt and angry. And I get it. I didn't want to betray him. But I couldn't let what he did slide. It wasn't just about the money, it was about trust, integrity, and doing the right thing, even when it's the hardest thing to do. The rest of my family sided with Tom. They felt I'd made the situation worse by telling Emma. And they kept saying Tom would have fixed it if I'd just given him more time. Maybe they were right, but I couldn't take that risk. What if he didn't fix it? What if he gambled more money away? And Emma's future was ruined because I stayed silent? It's been a few weeks now, and things haven't improved. My brother still won't speak to me. Emma hasn't been back to our house. And Grace says she's keeping her distance. Even from her, I feel like I've lost both Emma and Tom, and the guilt gnaws at me constantly. But I stand by what I did. Emma deserved to know. She deserved the chance to take control of her own money, to confront Tom and hold him accountable. If I'd stayed silent, I would have been complicit in his deceit. As much as I hate the rift this has caused in my family, I know I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd let it slide. The hardest part of all this is the silence, the way my brother has shut me out. The way my parents barely speak to me unless they're criticizing my decision. I feel isolated, like I'm being punished for doing what I thought was right. But deep down, I know that telling Emma was the only choice I could live with. Maybe one day, my brother will come around and understand why I did what I did. Maybe one day, we'll rebuild our relationship, but for now, I have to live with the consequences of my decision. And that's a heavy weight to bear. I lost my brother's trust. And maybe even my family's. But at least I can look at myself in the mirror and know I did the right thing. Even if it came at a high cost.